Well, here we are then. Directive 8020 is right around the corner, so I wanted to replay what many would argue has been the best game in the Dark Pictures Anthology so far. House of Ashes has you navigate a risky, choice-driven narrative involving two idiot kings, a modest supply of heroin, some bloodthirsty boys, and a toxic love triangle with a former Disney star. Let me start from the beginning. We kick off in ancient Sumeria, 2231 BC, where the Akkadian Empire is currently balls deep in plague, famine, and war. Just some of those things of the past that thankfully have never carried over into the modern world. We play as General Balathu, who's beating on the Scoutian prisoner and is about to decapitate him as a blood sacrifice because apparently that's the answer to all their problems. That is until he's summoned by King Naram Sin, who Old Matey Guard has a few small concerns about, basically saying that he's a walking red flag. I guess he could argue they have hundreds of Gutian prisoners held in the temple, all lined up to be sacrificed to some moon god. Balathu knows this, but still remains loyal to Naram Sin, who informs us that an army of Gutians are on their way to storm the temple. Obviously, Balathu would prepare his army for battle, but first he's being ordered to kill a defenseless young woman, as that's all the sacrifices they can squeeze in today. However, I don't want Balathu to be a total dick, so I show some restraint and suggest we keep the girl alive, but she grabs the knife and attacks anyway. The little baddie puts up a solid fight because my attention to QuickTime events is about as lackluster as my performance in the bedroom, so like all the others, she too runs away. Unfortunately, cardio isn't her strong suit because we'd end up impaling her with a long spear, decapitating her, and giving the king some head. No, not like that, you dirty dog. I mean the way he throws her head so disrespectfully that even ISIS would call it a bit too much. Meanwhile, the prisoner, whose name is Karum, gets into a tussle with one of the guards, ultimately killing him and taking the key. I know security's stretched a little thin right now, but if you're the only one keeping watch, you should be a little bit more on top of it, Chief. Taking a little peek outside, General Balathu's army have all readied their shields and are basically forming one large chastity belt across the temple entrance. The Gutian army charges at the temple right as an eclipse dawns over them, so Naram Sin just stares at the moon in a state of paranoia because that edible he took an hour ago has finally kicked in. Safe to say that above ground there's quite a bloodbath going on. Underground are the tremors and horrifying shrieks of something that is surely not human. Karum makes his way to the throne room and is ready to tear shit up, only to find that someone or something has already done the job for him. With all the unseen skirmishes outside, General Balathu makes the heroic move of running away, retreating back to the temple and leaving the rest of his men to deal with whatever supernatural hell is out there. Karum is definitely a little bit salty after their last encounter, but he soon realizes they're both dealing with a threat that's bigger than them. They head to the catacombs together, looking for a secret exit, but of course it was never going to be that easy when one of those bloodthirsty creatures catches up to them. Putting their differences aside, they stand together to fight their common enemy, which honestly goes down about as well as you can expect in a Dark Pictures game. Unfortunately, our boy Karum is the first one to get slimed, so please leave some thoughts and prayers in the comments. Balathu is up next with an encounter that feels very reminiscent of that iconic scene from Alien 3, and then it cuts to black. As is customary with these games, we're introduced to the curator, who's ultimately there to roast us for our poor decisions and offer hints on ways to be less shit. Anyway, we jump forward to Iraq in 2003 and meet Lieutenant Jason Kolchak, who's described by the game as intolerant, which really means he has some heavy biases to work through. Next is Lieutenant Colonel Eric King, the uptight boss man who frames himself as an authority figure and has an ego about as fragile as a porcelain dildo. He introduces us to his assistant Clarice Stokes, who clarifies that it's Dr. Clarice Stokes because Eric always likes to leave that little part out. Eric doesn't actually believe that women can ever go on to be doctors, scientists, or anything more accomplished than him really. After that, we move on to Ashley Tisdale, who plays Commanding Officer Rachel King. Yes, that's King, as in the wife of Colonel Eric King, who just flew in a minute ago, and she's engaging in highly anti-Christian relations with Sergeant Nick Kay. Nick takes this moment to open up to Rachel, but unfortunately this is 2003, guys weren't really encouraged to speak up about their feelings just yet, and she also gets word that Eric has arrived, which kind of spoils the moment. Nick tries to have that what are we conversation, and wants to know if she'll end things with Eric so he can be with her. Unfortunately, Nick's an anxious attacher and Rachel's an avoidant, so instead of reassuring him or even just putting a pin on it for now, she proceeds to do neither and give him complete silence with absolutely no answer at all. Meanwhile, Jason's giving Eric and Clarice a grand tour of the base, which was one of Saddam Hussein's penthouses right before he went into hiding. He introduces them both to Merwin, who, well, in 2026 would definitely be an escalating HR nightmare.
We have company.
Yeah, maybe Miss here would like to watch me get my sweat on, huh? Wanna spot me, little lady?
Can see you just fine from here, thanks.
Then they meet Joey. Poor, sweet Joey, who gets a hard time from Eric because I made him overbearing and insufferable in this interaction. Jason mentions his commanding officer, referring to her as the Queen Bitch, without knowing she's Eric's wife, which is also not an ideal situation. The painful awkwardness wouldn't end there though, because Eric is soon reunited with the Queen Bitch herself, who finds out that he's actually here to oversee command of the entire operation and run this mission briefing instead. You see, Eric thinks he's cooking and believes Saddam has an underground chemical weapons silo in the Zagros Mountains. He's really out here playing the trust me card with everyone because apparently he has the high-end satellite technology to justify it. Playing as Eric, you can even find a newspaper showing George Bush's poorly aged declaration of hostilities ended in Iraq with the whole mission accomplished banner and all. Pretty ironic given what hostilities actually await us, but right now it's time to meet our boy Salim. Salim's a lieutenant in the Republican Guard who's returning home now that the war is supposedly over. He's got a birthday gift for his son Zane, who we learn has just been accepted into university and is reading up on ancient Sumerian mythology because he's still processing the brutal deaths of old maidies Balathu and Karum. We also learn from this photograph that he possesses the smile of someone who takes one last look at the house party before turning on the stove and leaving for good. Birthday prezzies will have to wait for now, because Salim gets a visit from Captain Basri, who orders him to return for another battle. Salim's under the impression that the war is over and tries to wriggle out of it because his son's birthday is just a little bit more important to him, but Captain Basri's having none of that and drags him into it all the same. Back to the Americans, who are now raiding an old farm, likely traumatizing all the shepherds in the process because Eric says there's an underground weapons silo, but really he's just going on a whim. Anyone around here with half a brain knows that this operation's a dead end, and deep down, Jason knows it too. Unfortunately for now, the prejudice still remains strong in Jason, because he'll take any excuse to rough up these villagers. Rachel, being a bit more cultured, tries speaking to them in Arabic and going for a stern conversation instead. Either she's butchering their language the way Trump butchers basic English, or these guys have the social skills of a League of Legends player as nobody responds to a word she's saying. Instead, they find under the carpet here is the entrance they've been looking for, finally locating Saddam's chemical— oh, no, never mind, it's just a heroin stash, fuck me. There would be bigger problems ahead, however, when Joey spots a chopper getting blasted out of the sky with a rocket launcher, spiraling down and crashing harder than my mental health whenever I'm faced with a minor inconvenience. Joey takes a bullet to the leg and waits to be revived, forgetting that he's in House of Ashes and not Battlefield 6. Captain Basri orders Salim and the boys to engage, while Jason, Nick, and Merwin try to reach Joey. Jason has the others cover him while he makes a heroic run, but I keep hitting the wrong buttons on every QuickTime event, so a random teammate saves me and he ends up dying due to my incompetence. Because of how shit I am, Nick steps up and goes for it instead, but all this leads to is Joey getting shot dead by an enemy. Jason comes across one of the shepherds who's completely unarmed and just wants to escape all the violence, so we're presented with the horrific choice of whether or not to shoot him down. I decide that not committing a war crime is probably better for Jason's character development arc, which my man Salim takes notice of. Salim decides that's been enough killing for today and shows Jason the same kind of mercy, which might have been the start of a beautiful friendship if the ground didn't start collapsing right underneath them. Nobody's safe as the unstable ground takes in more men than Officer Megan Hall, dropping everyone into a large underground cavern. Nick falls through some rubble and finds himself separated from the others, but he yells out and hears back from Jason, who is very close by. Not far down the cave, however, Nick spots a dark, mysterious figure that snaps its head towards him for a quick second before scurrying away like Gollum. He soon finds Jason and tries to explain what he saw, but Jason's not quite in the mood for ghost stories just yet. As they push on, they come across Merwin, who's in a pretty rough state and just hanging on by a thread, a very bloody barbed wire thread that Clarice is struggling to free him from. They cut him down and look for some morphine to help ease the pain, but before they can do much, Clarice is yoinked away into the darkness. They soon hear some painful shrieks echoing closer in their direction, so the boys grab Merwin and make a run for it. Merwin won't stop screaming, bringing whatever's back there onto them, so we have to button bash a little morphine into him and shut him the fuck up. We get back to Salim, who's had a rough fall, but hasn't fallen onto any barbed wire, so I'm just happy to see my boy alive. We walk past a trail of blood, chuck a flare as we stroll through the tunnel, and force open this door where Salim finds one of these creatures feasting on his teammate. Of course, our boy makes a run for it, trying his best to escape death the way I try to escape all my responsibilities. Now cornered, he decides his best move is to challenge the thing to a screaming match, but no need because more tremors would ensue and fate would drop a literal truck onto the lanky geezer instead. It's time to check on Eric. The entire reason everyone's in this mess, and he's landed somewhere with Rachel, so today's been one hell of a reunion. They descend further down the cave, where Rachel makes a point of it looking like no chemical weapon silo she's ever seen. Eric, being who he is, can't admit he's wrong, especially in front of a woman, so he plays the whole you never know card for now. They eventually reach Naram-Sin's throne room from the prologue, and it looks like some archaeologists were once here first. Eric finally realizes that this is what his cutting-edge satellite technology thought was Saddam's secret stash of goodies. Back again to Jason and Nick, who have those creatures right on their tail with a heavily drugged Merwin slowing them down. We get the choice to climb through some loose debris or just go around it, which I felt was safer given the state Merwin's in right now. As the creature approaches, Jason stops for a quick tea break and has to do the whole hold your breath exercise until all is clear. Sadly, I botch it right at the very end, and Merwin gets brutally snatched through a narrow gap in the rocks. This is probably nothing for a cave diver, but a whole world of pain for him. Without Merwin's deadweight slowing them down though, Jason and Nick make a proper run for it, but don't get very far before Jason is jumped by one of the creatures. He struggles in another button bashing segment for a wee bit, then gets hurled over towards Nick, who opens fire and scares the big ugly thing away. Back to Rachel and Eric, who got the generator running and are now working on fixing this old tape recorder while discussing the fragile state of their marriage. I get Rachel to show just the slightest hint of love and affection, so when Eric confesses that he wants her back again, she opts for total silence. Earlier I did say she's an avoidant, and I'll commit to that bit harder than she ever committed to her marriage. Eric realizes there's someone else in the picture, but before I can make Rachel deflect or gaslight him, the tape recorder starts working again and plays a spooky podcast from one of the researchers. The message implies that the expedition perhaps didn't go very well and that things are about to get much worse. Before they can process it though, along comes Captain Basri, who abseils after them with a gun and opens fire. They manage to lose him for now, but they wouldn't be in the clear just yet because another tremor causes Rachel to lose her balance, which sends her tumbling down a gnarly cliffside. Eric throws her a rope and tries pulling her up to safety, but she won't stop squirming, which just makes everything a lot more difficult. Ultimately, he decides the booty isn't quite worth dying for and cuts her off both physically and emotionally, leaving the video on a literal cliffhanger. As always, if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. With Directive 8020 on the horizon, searches for the Dark Pictures Anthology will hopefully be up and I can just shamelessly cash in on the hype. But in the more likely event that doesn't work, leave the video a quick like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you all in the next one.